Think about the last time you ate sugar. Maybe it was in your coffee, a soda, a cookie, bread, ketchup. You probably didn't even notice it. And that's the strange part. For most of human history, sugar wasn't something people casually sprinkled into their food. It was rare, expensive, sometimes even treated like medicine. Today, we can buy a bag of it for a few dollars, but getting from there to here took thousands of years. And along the way, sugar helped build fortunes, reshape trade, power plantations, drive the expansion of slavery, fuel revolutions, and eventually become one of the most common ingredients in the modern food system. There's even a part of this story involving a scientific cover-up, one where an entire industry quietly paid to shape what the world believed about your health. We'll get there. But first, so how did a simple tropical grass become so important? The answer begins far from Europe, far from America, and far from the modern kitchen. It begins in the tropical Pacific. Sugarcane was not originally a bag of white crystals. It was a plant, a tall grass packed with sweet juice. People in New Guinea learned to cultivate and use sugarcane thousands of years ago. From there, the crop gradually spread through parts of Southeast Asia and eventually reached the Indian subcontinent. But for a very long time, there was a problem. Sugarcane was difficult to store. You could chew the stalk, you could drink the juice, but once you wanted to carry that sweetness somewhere else, things became much harder. Then people in India figured out something transformative. They could extract the juice, heat it, and turn it into a concentrated, storable form. Now, sweetness didn't have to stay inside the plant. It could travel, and that changed everything. Once sugar could travel, it began moving along trade routes. Persian and Arab societies became important centers of sugar cultivation, processing, and trade. Techniques improved. Sugar mills appeared in regions where the climate allowed sugarcane to grow, and slowly sugar moved west. Eventually, Europeans encountered it through their connections with the Eastern Mediterranean and Islamic world. To them, sugar was extraordinary. Imagine tasting something intensely sweet without having to find honey. That was a completely different kind of luxury. But there was a catch. Sugarcane doesn't grow naturally in most of Northern Europe, so Europeans couldn't simply grow their own supply. They had to import it. And whenever demand rises faster than supply, someone sees an opportunity. But friends, this part of sugar's journey wasn't a story of choice. It came at an enormous human cost. Millions of Africans were violently forced from their homes and enslaved, stripped of their freedom to power the plantations that made sugar cheap. For centuries, European sugar was a luxury. Then came a crucial change. People stopped thinking only about where sugar came from and started asking how much more of it they could produce. Portugal began developing sugar production on Atlantic islands. The climate was ideal. The crop was profitable. But there was a problem that every plantation owner eventually faced: labor. Sugarcane is not an easy crop. It has to be planted, cut, transported quickly, crushed, and processed. And the entire system demanded enormous amounts of labor. The Atlantic plantation economy increasingly turned to enslaved Africans, and sugar became deeply entangled with the expansion of the transatlantic slave trade. This is where the story becomes much darker, because the cheap sweetness eventually reaching European tables came with an enormous human cost. Then sugarcane crossed the Atlantic. The Caribbean was almost perfect for it. Warm climate, long growing seasons, and enormous demand in Europe. Plantations expanded. European powers competed for islands, and sugar became one of the most valuable commodities in the Atlantic economy. But there was something unusual about this industry. A plantation could make enormous profits, if it had enough land and enough labor. That helped create a terrible economic logic. Human beings were treated as replaceable labor. Millions of Africans were forcibly transported across the Atlantic during the centuries of the transatlantic slave trade, and many were sent to plantation societies producing sugar and other commodities. Sugar did not single-handedly create that system, but sugar plantations became one of its major economic engines, and the consequences lasted far beyond the plantations themselves. And then something happened that plantation owners could not control: resistance. In the French colony of Saint-Domingue, one of the world's richest plantation colonies, enslaved people rose against the system in 1791. The conflict became the Haitian Revolution. It lasted for years, and in 1804, Haiti declared independence. Think about what that meant. A society built largely around plantation slavery had defeated the colonial power trying to control it. The revolution terrified slave-holding societies throughout the Atlantic world, and it also changed economics. France had lost one of its most valuable colonies. Napoleon's ambitions in North America were changing, and only a year earlier, the United States had purchased Louisiana from France. Sugar had somehow become connected to a much bigger story: the shape of nations themselves. But sugar had another problem. Cane needed the right climate, and Europe didn't have enough of it. Then scientists found another possibility: sugar beets. The beet was an ordinary-looking root, but inside it was sucrose, the same basic sugar found in sugarcane. Napoleon's government pushed beet sugar production during the disruption of the Napoleonic Wars, and slowly, Europe gained a new source of sugar. This was more than a scientific curiosity. It broke the idea that sugar had to come from tropical colonies. Now sugar could be produced in temperate Europe too. Technology was removing geography from the equation, and once that happened, sugar became cheaper, much cheaper. Now the story takes a turn. Sugar was no longer only for kings and wealthy merchants. Industrialization made it easier to produce. Railways moved crops faster. Factories refined sugar more efficiently. Prices fell. And suddenly, ordinary people could afford something previous generations could barely imagine: sweetness every day. Then sugar found the perfect partner: tea. Tea itself was becoming hugely popular in Britain, but sugar transformed the experience. A bitter drink could become sweet, comforting, familiar, and cheap. Sugar wasn't just something people ate, it became part of a daily routine: breakfast, tea breaks, desserts, jam, and eventually soft drinks. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, sugar was no longer just an ingredient. It was becoming an industrial commodity. Candy companies grew, soft drinks spread, packaged foods expanded, and in America, another sweetener began changing the market: high-fructose corn syrup. As corn production expanded and food processing became more sophisticated, manufacturers gained access to a cheap liquid sweetener. Its use grew dramatically during the late 20th century. USDA data shows just how large that shift became. Between 1970 and 1997, corn sweeteners rose sharply, while sucrose's share of caloric sweetener use fell substantially. The sweetener in your food supply wasn't necessarily coming from sugarcane anymore. Sometimes it was coming from corn. And this is where sugar's history becomes surprisingly modern. By the middle of the 20th century, scientists were debating what role different parts of the diet played in heart disease. Sugar was part of that debate, and later investigations uncovered something important. Internal documents showed that the Sugar Research Foundation had sponsored research in the 1960s that emphasized fat and cholesterol while downplaying evidence concerning sucrose. The funding and role of the Sugar Organization were not disclosed in the published review. That's not a conspiracy theory. The documents were real, and the historical analysis was published in the JAMA Internal Medicine Journal in 2016. But there's an important distinction. This does not mean sugar secretly caused every modern health problem. Nutrition is much more complicated than that. What it does show, it's something simpler. When industries have enormous financial interests in a scientific debate, the way research is funded and presented can matter. And by then, sugar was already everywhere. And that's what makes sugar's history so fascinating. It isn't really a story about sugar, it's a story about what happens when humans discover something desirable and then figure out how to produce more of it. A plant first cultivated thousands of years ago became a trade commodity. That commodity helped build plantation economies. Those plantations became deeply connected to slavery. Sugar wealth influenced empires. Resistance to those systems helped produce revolutions. Science found ways to grow sugar outside the tropics. Industry made it cheaper. And eventually, the world stopped thinking of sugar as a luxury at all. We started expecting it. That's the transformation. Not from sweet plant to sweet food, but from rare to ordinary. There is probably a little white bowl, a bottle, a box, or a packaged food containing the result of that 10,000-year journey. A journey that crossed oceans, built fortunes, changed nations, and changed what humans expect food to taste like. The next time you taste something sweet, remember, it wasn't always this easy, and it definitely wasn't always this simple. This is the hidden history of everyday things. If you love watching informative videos like this, do me a favor, hit subscribe and share it with a friend who'd find this as interesting as you do. It genuinely helps this channel keep making videos like this one.